Hello and happy Mother's Day, everybody at State of Flux. This is Matt with State of Flux, here with a review for The Terminator. Why The Terminator today? Well, the reason is twofold. Number one, The Terminator starts on May 12th, 1984. Today is May 12th. It happens to be Mother's Day, and this is a movie about the mother of the future. This is James Cameron's true directorial debut. Yes, he had made Piranha 2 The Spawning prior to this, a film that I believe he says he was fired from 5 times and wish he would have taken his name off of, but they just had to have a director's name attached to it, thus it was his. He doesn't really have a particularly strong stamp on that film, and the only thing I really have to say about Piranha 2 is that, it came out the same year as Jaws 3. Even though one's about giant flying fish, that one's easily the better of the two. That being said, I was interested in doing a monthly review of each of James Cameron's works, starting in May with The Terminator. This is one of my all-time favorite movies. I absolutely love this film. And it's unique in its structure, in how it tells its story, because it does 3 things with its acts. Act 1 is an act that kind of doesn't tell you anything expository. Everything you are told, you pick up visually. The first act is visual storytelling at its finest. You're trying to play catch up with the film to try to figure out who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, what they want with this woman, and what ultimately the goal is of everybody. You're trying to figure this out, and the film is exceptionally well told at getting you that information to piece it together yourself. The moment that Kyle and Sarah meet for the first time is when it turns into an expository storytelling, where everything is told verbally, but it does so in very smart ways. All the exposition scenes are told while the characters are on the run or hiding while being on the run, during the beats between action, and it creates this mounting sense of dread as you're being told the true horrible nature of everything that is unfolding. Why this man is trying to kill her, and what it all means, what the purpose is for, and what the future holds. And then you move into Act 3, which turns into a soft romance that then gives way to a genuine horror that is not unlike a slasher film by way of action movie. And all 3 of these acts are done insanely well. I think the middle act is probably the strongest of the bunch, but all of it is so good, and it's anchored by powerful, genuinely good performances by Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese, your sort of hero of the film. Then you have Linda Hamilton, who gives a really good performance here. We'll circle back to her in a couple months' time, as Sarah Connor, who is so good. She plays vulnerable in the beginning and tough as hell by the end. And it's completely believable, that trajectory of how she goes from being the Sarah of the beginning of the movie to the Sarah at the end of the movie. And then you have a strong performance from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, on the paper, this doesn't look like it's really that impressive, but when you really look at how controlled he is with his body movement, the way he utilizes his eye, he really takes to heart what he is as this killing machine that is a literal machine. And it's pretty strong performance. Again, we're going to circle back to him in a couple months' time for a different film. But I've always felt that Michael Biehn, who's an exceptional actor who does not get his due, gives one of his 3 strongest performances of his career in this film, the others being that in Tombstone and the Abyss. Again, we'll circle back to Michael Biehn in a couple months' time. But the action of this film is incredibly strong. It's nail-biting, and I think the reason that is because the action has weight to it. You don't know who's going to live or die because there is a genuine sense of dread because people get injured along the way. Reese gets shot in one of the early action scenes when he and Sarah first meet, right through the arm. So you know that there is a sense of danger here. They can get hurt, and if he gets hurt, she can get hurt, they can get hurt, they can die. They are human. He is not. The Terminator keeps repeatedly taking hits, and the fact that you're seeing that happen so constantly, you have no idea for the first-time viewer how he is going to get destroyed. How do you stop this unkillable thing? And it's really, really strong. It's compelling, and it makes that action really mount with, as I say, dread. By the final act, it plays as a horror film, and it's photographed like a horror film, even though there is no slashing element to it. It's just a machine that is trying to get to its target, not unlike Michael Myers before him. And it's done so incredibly well. I watched it again just this past night, and even knowing the outcome of the many sequels, I could not help feeling that mounting dread build as it becomes just her and it. It is so strong once they get to the factory. James Cameron really knocked it out of the park his first time off, and this is a movie that was made for $6.5 million. Now, I know this film came out 10 years beforehand, but to put it into context, Mallrats was made for $6 million. That's not a lot of money. This movie looks expensive, and even if you double that by 1995 terms, this movie would have cost around the same amount as, you know what, I'm not even going to make those comparisons. The point is, it is a really good-looking action film. The action holds up, the visuals hold up, all of it looks good. It is well lit. It doesn't have the trademark blue that Cameron would be known for. There's elements of that here and there, particularly in the romantic scenes. But the visual flair is built in camera. The lighting has like a little ways to go. We'll come back to that in about a month's time. But yeah, I really can't stress enough how good this film is. And it's not, I haven't even touched on some of the other elements. I love the naturalism of the police unit that is there trying to figure out who this damn killer is, and then once they do kind of have their idea of what's going on, the banter that they have back and forth with Sarah and with Silverman. Silverman, that actor is quite good. But Lance Henriksen, Paul Winfield give great performance, completely naturalistic. Everything is anchored in reality here. Even though you're listening to this far-fetched idea that doesn't seem plausible, even though now in this light of the world and all the AI in it seems incredibly dangerously plausible. But you're listening to this would-be pseudo-perplexing story with full belief and authenticity because all the characters are naturally reacting to things that they're hearing as you would. And the neat thing about this is, bringing it back to the mother, is this is a sort of the origin story for a character that is going to change the world. And we keep hearing about that, but this isn't his story. It's the mother's, it's hers. This is the akin to the nativity story. This is the Virgin Mary story that you get with Sarah Connor. And it's really, really strong in that element. And you really grow attached to her in like a tight hour and 45 minutes. She really develops, and along with Cameron and the characters that surround her, a really powerful character that you want to continue watching. And luckily enough, we do. Now this film does have a couple of criticisms, some I kind of agree with, some of which I don't. I'm going to tackle the one that I think a lot of people strike at quite a bit, which is that the movie doesn't make sense because it would have had to, the time travel of it all, really. It would have had to have happened once in order for it to happen at all. But to that I say, not really. Like, yes, Sarah, by the end of this film, spoiler alert, does become pregnant, and that baby, we find out in the sequel, is a boy that she names John Connor. But there is an element of maybe that was planted in her head and she only named that baby John Connor because she was told to. And that it could have played out entirely linearly the first time around. We don't know that the John Connor of the future had the same dad. He selected the man who he chose to be his dad, is one way of reading it. And he fed that man this story of how great she was in order to ensure that she would find a plausible opportunity for them to become romantically involved, and thus creating a scenario where a future John Connor could come about. And I think that is kind of an interesting notion when you think about the sequels and how John Connor is a different actor in all of them. Citing that, you know, maybe these are all individually different timelines. And the only reason John Connor exists ever is because it's manufactured that way. That's just something that, like, I feature in my own kind of headcanon, that it isn't necessarily a logic flaw that in order for John to be born at all, the timeline would have had to happen once. If John just sent somebody back to save her, setting up a scenario wherein that's plausible. If she had had a girl, would she have named that girl John? Would the story have been any different? I think, honestly, no. This story still could have happened. We just got a sequel where we definitely have an answer that that person was named John, but I don't think that that necessarily negates the film. I'm hoping I'm making sense with that. The other criticism that I do think has some validity is, for a first-time watch or taking long breaks between seeing this film, the movie flows insanely well. But unlike, I would say, most of James Cameron's other movies, there is not necessarily a tightness of flow with repeat viewings. I think a film like T2 and True Lies, Titanic, Aliens have infinite rewatchability because of the way the story is told. This one, because the story is told in the unique way that I thought was a very big positive in the beginning, if you watch it a second time in quick succession, as I used to do when I was a kid, you can find it to be maybe a touch, not necessarily bland, but tiresome, because of the way that the story is being told. In its unique way, it works really well for a first time, but with repeat viewings, once you already know what's up, it feels a little slower. And that gets worse as you, with each rewatch, unless you give yourself a wide break from it, as I did this time around. And I really came out loving this just as much as I had the first time around. When I first saw this movie, I was blown away. And we'll have to see what my repeat viewing of T2 says, but to this day, T1 has always been my favorite of that franchise. I know that's a minority opinion, but I love this movie. I think it's just insanely well made. And I hope I've made my point on that as to why. But what do you guys think of this film? Oh, before I move on to that, I forgot to touch on the one bit of controversy with this film, which is that I guess it's not the one bit of controversy, but the major bit of controversy is that this film is co-credited. It's written by James Cameron and Gale and Hurd. I think William Wisher had something to do with it. This one as well. Maybe that was only T2. But it's dedicated to Harlan Ellison for story contribution, and that's because Harlan Ellison saw this movie and sued, inciting that James Cameron had lifted material from a couple of his Outer Limits episodes. I believe they were The Demon with the Glass Hand and The Soldier. Now, you watch The Soldier, there's a lot of visual similarities that it's completely believable that, yes, Cameron may have cribbed some of those things and put it in this movie. Demon with the Glass Hand I find a little more abstract. And I think you can, brush it off as creative license, having seen something probably when he was younger and just kind of incorporated it into his own psyche without realizing it, and made great minds think alike situation. However, he ultimately bent to Ellison's will. Ellison was a unique and interesting guy, kind of a jerk, not unlike what I hear Cameron is kind of like, as a lot of these creatives tend to be. But he was incredibly protective over his work to, I think, a detriment. He, and maybe I'll touch on this someday with his Twilight Zone episodes from the 80s, he and Wes Craven did not get along very well. And they were kind of the two people spearheading the operation of getting that show off the ground. Yeah, so speaking to that controversy and having watched The Soldier, that one I buy into a little bit. That one also is about a soldier from the future who gets sent back in time, yada yada. And then there's some scenes that are very visually distinctively similar between the two, especially with Kyle's arrival in 1984 LA. Demon with the Glass Hand, as I say, I think is an abstract reading to buy into that they're similar outside of a robot apocalypse kind of situation. But if you haven't watched those works, Outer Limits is a good show, almost as good as The Twilight Zone, and I urge you to check out those episodes and many more. There's a great one with William Shatner about something about Venus, if memory serves, that's a really, really good episode of television. But this isn't a review for that. This is a review for The Terminator, which I absolutely love, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. What do you think of The Terminator? Is this one of your favorite James Cameron movies? Is this one of your favorite movies? For a while there, this was my second favorite movie of all time, all throughout high school. Since then, I've expanded my taste and interest, and I don't know if I love the top 5 ranking system as much as I used to back in the day. But this certainly would be among those films that I cherish and will take with me to my grave as being major cornerstones in my cinematic landscape that I kind of point to as my development. And is just genuinely one of my all-time favorite movies. I would like to hear what you think about this film in the comments section down below, and next month be prepared for a review of Aliens. This time it's war. We're going to continue that mother trend. Maybe I'll get it up for Father's Day. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.